Are you part of Be More Noma or?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Well, actually, okay, let me be clear. I am not a member of Be More Noma, but I attend a lot of their events.
Oh, nice.
I am considering joining.
Ah, are you an architect?
Interior architecture.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yep.
You're a student? Yeah. Here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what year are you in?
I'm third year. We've met before.
Have we really?
It
Was
was
that the Noma conference?
yeah.
I met so many people during that conference.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay.
I'm
a cheerleader.
nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you. It's nice to see your work.
Thank you. Did you guys get to see part of the panels and the booklets already, or
Just a little bit.
just a little bit?
I didn't open anything up yet.
Let me know when you want me to start.
Okay, I would say we could give like 5 to 10 more minutes before we can start, just to see who else comes.
You guys students here too?
Yes.
Like, what year are you?
First year grad student.
First year grad. Nice.
First year grad as well.
First year grad. Okay. And Mark?
Yes.
It's fun, you're almost out, halfway there. It's 2 years, that's 2 years here, right?
It's for us, it's like 2.5 years.
2.5.
Yeah.
2.5 years. Why is it 2.5 years for you?
Basically the degree we got in undergrad, that was architecture related, but not to the curriculum.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, okay. That's cool. Almost halfway there.
Yeah. Just want to have more unit left.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, let me get going. Hi, everyone. I hope people online can hear me. I think they can. Might try to speak a little louder. So this is Contextualizing Africa. This image that you're seeing on the screen here is a photo from the opening reception at Rice University. We had, obviously, Rice students. We had Prairie View. Got a bus for Prairie View students to come because they're an hour out. We had University of Houston students be there. We had the local chapter, the Houston chapter of NOMA there too. Some of the local firms came, so it was really nice to see everyone be together in this space and really taking in the exhibition. So, Contextualizing Africa, as I said before, and I led this exhibition with the NOMAS chapter at Rice University. So I was president of the chapter, and I thought it'd be a great initiative to do it through NOMAS since it fit the mission of what NOMA and NOMAS is, and just kind of ran with it. So a little bit about me. So my name is Isabel Ngumi. I got my Bachelor of Science in Architectural Studies from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And then I went straight from undergrad to grad school at Rice University. I just graduated and figuring this whole work thing is so different from school. I am from Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. It's in West Africa, right next to Ghana. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's a French-speaking country. We're colonized by the French, so now we are a French-speaking country. I've lived in so many different places. I grew up between Abidjan and Chicago. I lived in Dakar in Senegal for 3 years, lived in Spain for a year, did a study abroad in Paris. I've kind of gotten the chance to explore the world a little bit, and I think that's what was a big push and a big guidance as to why I really wanted to do this this exhibition. So you guys are already familiar with NOMAS, but with the Rice chapter, obviously a student chapter of the larger professional organization, and Rice is a PWI, so the NOMAS chapter was really something that we held close to our hearts and really wanted to grow its presence since it was just its second year when I did this exhibition, and really wanted to put it on the map. So the year that the exhibition happened, it opened at Rice in April of 2023. And I was president of the chapter. I had 2 people really help with the design and making of this exhibition. And then we had the rest of the board to really help support everything else that we were doing since this consumed so much of our time. The purpose of this exhibition was really to bring exposure to what is happening in Africa. So being from Ivory Coast, every time I would bring precedent studies from home, professors would always be really confused. My classmates would be confused, like, there's no way this is in Africa. And I'm like, guys, it's in Africa. Like, there's so much happening. There's so much beautiful work being done. But it felt like the curriculum was so Eurocentric, in both in undergrad and grad school. And I feel like that's a pretty big thing in architecture education in general. So I really wanted to change that and bring light to that. And that's a thought that I had in undergrad, but I never felt that it was a time to really get the ball rolling on this. But once I got to Rice, met with the dean the first semester, and I told him, I said, hey, I have this idea. How do you feel about it? And he said, it's it's a great idea. I'm like, I know you guys are working the curriculum. Every school's always working the curriculum. I know it takes time. I don't know what school politics are like, but I really want to do this. And he said, okay, put a proposal together and I'll see what I can do. And I went back to the board because I knew that the vision that I had for this exhibition, I knew that I could not do it by myself. And I would need a lot of hands to contribute to this and pour their hearts into this project too to really make it happen. So put a proposal together, went back to the team, pitched it again, and he said, okay, here's some money. And now go do your thing. I was like, whoa, okay, let's get the ball rolling and really make this happen. So that's how all of that started. And the school ended up giving us the space, the jury space. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Rex, but this is the jury space. It's pretty central to the school, which you can see in this axon here. And a lot of students end up cutting across the building. So I was thinking this would be really great for not only architecture students, but even non-architecture students to also see this and broaden their knowledge as well. We had a couple series of iterations as we were designing this, and this is one of the ones that we had that we ended up going with for the most part. We really wanted to have these booklets. So these hanging panels that you're seeing here that give you a broader overview of what each firm is, and these booklets that give you more depth and more detail about what the projects are, looking more into drawings and whatnot, and really letting you dive deep into these projects. A quick collage that we had put together to also show the firms, because as you're telling these firms to give you their projects, they're gonna ask, okay, how are you planning to lay it out? And I feel like even as architecture students, we're very possessive about work. So I was like, okay, if I'm asking you to give me your work, and I should be able to give you an idea of what I will be doing with it. I'm not just gonna be displaying it in any way, and actually putting care into the work that you're sharing with us. So this is a collage that we put together to share with them and give them an idea of what we were thinking about. Ended up having 10 firms be a part of the exhibition, 10 firms from 9 African countries and 23 projects to be a part of this. And the goal was really to give a wide breadth of the continent. So that's how the name Contextualizing Africa actually came about, because I think context is so important when we're speaking about architecture in general, but especially when it comes to projects on the continent, because we're all colonized by different countries, like European countries. That affects the way that we design now. It affects the way that the cities are laid out, the width of the streets. So it has a ripple effect on everything that is happening today. So it's inevitable, it's embedded in our histories. The climate, if you're in West Africa versus in East Africa, North and South, it's completely different. The materials that are available to you. If you're one of the islands and you're Madagascar, you might not have access to the same materials as the countries that are on the mainland and whatnot. So contextualizing Africa, I think that's really what my thought process was with that. It's just context is so important. So let's contextualize these projects. And this is just a map to give you a general overview of where these countries are. And they are kind of touching on different parts of the continent, which is what I was really pushing for. We have, firm Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, 2 firms in Ivory Coast. I might be biased. I know that's where I'm from, but I thought the 2 firms were really great to be a part of this, so ended up having 2 firms from there. And Cabo Verde, which is a really, really small island off the coast of Senegal. So I'll give you just a little bit, since most of you have not gotten the chance to look at the exhibition yet, I want to give you just a little bit about what you're going to see. So this project is by Nuevo Architects. It's the Dennis Goldberg House of Hope. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dennis Goldberg, but he was an activist back in South Africa. He was one of the people that was in prison with Nelson Mandela. And he was very big on the arts, culture, music, and that's the way that he connected with the youth and went about his activism. And Joe Noguero, the architect who owns this firm, who worked on this project, he's actually married to Dennis Goldberg's niece. So when he was raising funds to put this sort of museum together of the work that he's done and whatnot, it only made sense to hire Joe Noguero to work on this. And unfortunately, he never got to see the project done because he passed away before it was finished. But Cave Bureau. So Cave Bureau is in Kenya, and they're more of a research-based firm. They do some built work, but I think their strength is really in the research that they do. And this is the Masai Cow corridor. So again, with context and speaking about, like our histories and whatnot, we have a lot of tribes that ended up being displaced when we started to urbanize and put all these big cities together and whatnot. And the Maasai tribe, they will always bring their cows to where now the main city is, in Nairobi. But now with urbanization and all these infrastructures, all these highways and whatnot, they can't really do that. It's kind of harder to do. So what Cape Hero was doing here is, what can we design to start giving them ownership of their ancestral land back? How can we give them something that won't disrupt what they've been doing for so many years because of this imposed urbanism that is there now? Adingo architecture in Uganda. This is just a research project that they had done on Congolese migrants in Uganda, and looking at the size of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with African markets, but always very packed, very dense, very small, and people get very creative with the way they're laying out their goods and whatnot. So this is a research project that they started doing to look into that and how it had a larger effect on the rest of the city. Ramos Castellano Arquitectos, they're in Cabo Verde. And this building that you're seeing here is an art museum, but on artisanal crafts. And what you're seeing on the facade, I love color. Somebody looked at me like, you're so bright today, all this yellow. I'm like, guys, the sun is not out. Someone has to be the sun today. But the way they use color in their work, which you'll see in the other projects too that they have, is so beautiful. And what you're seeing on the facade here are these lids, like the lids to like paint cans, for example, or the barrels that the goods are shipped in. So it's an island, so everything has to get shipped in, all the materials that they need for literally just to keep the island running. So they thought, how can we push our sustainability and use what's already there? So they use these lids and painted them, and it's actually an operable facade, which is really fascinating. Mabeo Studios, so they're in Botswana, and Peter Mabeo is not trained as an architect, but I think architecture and furniture go hand in hand together. And seeing the way that they use texture and they texturize, the wood and whatnot, I thought was really, really beautiful and important to be a part of this. He does hire architects, and they're all very hands-on. If you look at their Instagram and their shops and whatnot, it's just a very active wood shop with all these test trials and things that they're doing. It's amazing. So you'll see more about their work, obviously, in the booklets. Active social architecture. They're in Rwanda, and this is a primary school that they did. And this building is so beautiful because of the way it fits within the context of the neighborhood that they were building in, down to the colors, the materials, the roof, the angled roof matches perfectly with like the homes nearby. And it just goes back to say how context is important in so many different ways. ARC, they're in Tunisia, so they're further up north, and this is a health center that they had done. And if you look at the photos on the interior, it's very simple, a lot of ventilation happening. I think the beauty with, I got asked recently, so what makes our African architecture? Because when you're looking at whatever is different from like Japanese architecture, for example, certain elements that come to play. And the first thing that came to mind was that a lot of the time it's things that you don't see. So using passive systems and whatnot, like that's just so important. Like back home, a lot of the buildings don't have these integrated HVAC systems, for example. It's possible to live without it. But I think like in the US, for example, when I first got here, I was like, what is all this? Like you can just, but there's so many ways to design that don't require all of these systems, having like thermal massing as a part of your facade, the size of your windows, cross ventilation and all that. I think all of those things are very, very important. When I think of African architecture, I think of the sustainability. And I think maybe in the future, people will turn to that as, like for guidance as we're trying to reach all these 2030 goals, all these, so you never know. Cabinet DNK in Ivory Coast. This is actually my uncle's firm, and he's one of the reasons why I'm an architect. Well, not one of. He is the reason why I'm an architect today. And this is a library that they did in São Paulo. It's about an hour north of the economic capital, and what you're seeing as the bricks there, those are actually bricks that they made with the land that they built on. So they excavated and they use that to make the bricks and use it to build the building. So again, going back to sustainability and whatnot. With the raw fuel lighting and the furniture. Traino architecture in Madagascar. Joan is very big on working with people and understanding the users of the building, and that's something that she kind of touches on in her booklet. Kofi Diabate Architect, they're also in Ivory Coast, and this is the headquarters. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Orange, but Orange is a cellular provider like AT&T and whatnot, and it's very big in West Africa and in Europe, in some countries in Europe, I should say. So this is their headquarters in Abidjan in Ivory Coast. And what you're seeing there, it's a double skin facade, and the facade was inspired by a golf ball because the neighborhood that it's in is called Liberagor, and it's an iconic golf course. Not that many people golf, but it's an iconic golf course in the city, and the neighborhood is really popular. So they thought, why not get inspired by what's already there and have fun with the architecture that we're putting together. Like I mentioned, there's a beautiful courtyard on the inside with these patterns inspired by different textiles and whatnot. So you could see that in the booklet, so it's really beautiful. So just kind of going back to us putting this together, I'm excited for you guys to see that. I feel like you guys probably had a lot of that and coming together to have everything put together. But when we were putting it together at Rice, we had our final reviews for a whole week. That Friday, our bodies crashed, we slept, and then Saturday morning, we all woke up and we started putting everything together because we didn't have the space to kind of store the things already built. We had this large table that we built by hand, so like the conduit pipes being cut by hand, people coming together to build it. It was really beautiful to see because I don't think it's as often that you see the school really coming together to collaborate on something. You usually have a partner you work on your studio project, you might have another lecture where you're working with 3 other people, but I think it's rare to see so many students come together, especially the Black students. And one of them is from Botswana, and that was his first year as a freshman. He was like, I didn't think I'd be seeing a friend from Botswana being a part of, my first year of architecture school. That was really exciting to hear. More of us in the middle of the night getting up there, just testing different things out, measuring things. We had everything laid out, but obviously you never know how things are going to turn out until you're physically in that space, and we didn't have access to the space until the review's finished. So we're using our test plots to hang things from the ceiling to see too. And this is what the final looked like in the jury space. And that photo on the left there is from the opening reception of people flipping through. I had books be a part of the exhibition because I acknowledge that there is a certain limitation when it comes to exhibition. You obviously cannot cover everything, but it's always great to implement other people's voices and have them give their own spin and perspectives on things. So I had a book list that I had be a part of the exhibition and then donated to the school. Because another part of it was, how do we diversify the school's library? So I got all this funding to this exhibition. How can I make sure that it has a long-lasting effect and it's not just this installation that's up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then gone? But how can we actually impact the school and the students that are going to be there after us? And I think, and books was my way of doing that. And just some more fun photos. Some of the books, if you guys are interested in checking these out. And yeah, check out the Instagram. I'm terrible with social media, but I'm trying to post a bit more on there. So if you're interested to see what's gonna happen with the next, I'm working on the book for it right now through the school. So that's gonna be really fun. So yeah, definitely check out the Instagram. Hopefully it's gonna travel more. It went to the University of Illinois last year, and then now we're here, which is really exciting. Yeah, do you guys have any questions?
I guess like my question is that how many firms did you talk to in total? And then was there any other reason besides just being really protective of their words? Yeah, was it just if they were really protective of their words? Or their reason?
So how many firms, I don't know if the people might heard you, but the question was how many firms that I ended up talking to, and if the reasoning for meeting with some of them was just because they were protective of the work. Sent out probably 300 emails. There was a list of firms that I knew just based on my own thing that, wow, I've always loved their work. every time I see their work, I'm just so fascinated by it. Everyone needs to see this. So it was a list of firms and I'm like, okay, I'm targeting you. I'm gonna go really hard to get you. I'm bombarding your email. Like there's no way you're not gonna see this. DMing them on Instagram. I almost got Contextualizing to be a part of it. And that's when I realized, sometimes these firms will not look at their emails because they're getting so many emails, but if you DM them on Instagram, fun fact, they might respond. And to me, that was a win. I'm like, Contextualizing reply back. Okay, it was probably an assistant somewhere, but you know what? We ate with that, thank you. But a lot of emails went out. A lot of responses came in. We also did an open call for submission because there's probably some firms that I wasn't even aware of, but if they were interested, like submit your work so we could take a look at it as we're curating and whatnot. And meeting with them, it wasn't solely because, it wasn't solely a, what's the word, like being possessed of the work, but also just being curious as to what even is this. Like there was a lot of curiosity as to why are you guys doing this? What's the reasoning behind it? What's your motivation behind it? So just explaining it to them, and as I was putting all those slide decks together, it's like, oh, we're meeting, okay guys, continue with this one tomorrow, okay, cool. Okay. But curating the thing based on who we're meeting with and also explaining to them why I think their work is important and why I value their work and why I think their work, they should let me hand me part of their projects and have it be a part of this. Also letting them know that, hey, like you're not just some random firm that I'm just, like actually going through their portfolio and looking at every single project and explaining why this one and why that one. Why should you submit this? And so I think a lot of it was just a lot of curiosity. I don't think it's as often that you see students just doing something like this. So I think there was just a lot of curiosity too. And they had a lot of good questions. Some of the questions they were asking, I was like, I have not made it that far. Let me send you an email tomorrow. It's a great question, but not thought that far yet. So it kept me on my toes and kept me questioning myself too. So it was great. We have one question here.
I could just speak up. Hi, thank you for your lecture. I think like your exhibition's really cool, like in terms of you're looking at modern contemporary African architecture. Did you in like preparing for the like how you started your research process for this, did you like were you thinking in terms of like a historic like relationship from stemming from like Corbusier's impact in urbanism, or how did you think about like developing a process that makes or I guess as you're thinking about the book, how are you thinking about like contextualizing like these urban designs and developments? I mean, they're more designs than developments because it's not like real estate, but
That's a really, some of the firms actually have, they have like so many acres of land that they're developing right now with underground parking garage. People are like, ooh, I don't like guys. But it's really cool. It's not things that we see, but when I first started thinking about this exhibition was an undergrad, so probably like 3-4 years before I actually got the ball rolling on that. And at first I was thinking it was gonna be like very historical, very this, but I realized no, why are we going so far back? Like, why not look at what's happening right now? I think usually that's the best way to catch people's attention too. And my big thing was how can people use these projects as a way of like bringing it to studio as precedents and whatnot. And if we go too far back, it might not be as possible to do that. And as I started doing research going back, I realized how hard it is to find accurate information on the histories of a lot of these countries. And that put the brakes on it for me because I got to the studio, I had all these classes, I'm studying abroad, we're in like 10,000 time zones now. I was like, okay, let's limit ourselves. And so that was a part of it too, but finding accurate resources was very difficult. And with the time that I had, I knew that it would not be possible. And I didn't want to just rush something together, put inaccurate information out there. So I just thought, everything just kind of started going together, and I'm glad it ended up being more contemporary. So I think it will have that ended up being more impactful for people too in that sense. I don't know if that answered your question. Oh, and why not focus on Corbusier's? We talk too much about them. His work is beautiful. I love his work, but I think it's then recentering it back on the colonizer and not really focusing on us and the work that we're doing. So that was another thing that I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
So first of all, I want to say that was a wonderful presentation, very enlightening. To your point of colonization, just out of curiosity, it's a much more simplistic question. what was the makeup of a lot of these firms that kind of got back to you? Were they typically culturally majority, like regions, or what was the makeup of the firms?
The firms that got back to us,
The firms that you're presenting on here,
the makeup of them as in like
like culturally, racially, what was the makeup of a lot of the firms?
okay, great question. So that was another debate I had with myself, like an internal. When I say it was a stressful couple of months, because you realize how much power you have, especially when you're exposing people to something new. I was like, oh, like I'm setting the tone for something here. And one of the firms, Active Social Architecture, for example, I'll go back. All of the other firms are architects from the countries that they're working in. But Active Social Architecture, for example, they're Italian architects that ended up moving to Rwanda, opened a firm, and started doing really good work there. And that was a conflict that I had back and forth. I'm like, dang, they're not African, but they are producing African architecture, and being very careful with the verbiage of, and that's something I'm thinking about with the book too, like African architecture versus architecture in Africa, two completely different things. So that was an internal conflict that I had, and so they're Italian architects, might be backfiring what I'm saying a little bit, but they're doing really good work for the communities that they're working in. And I think that's part of, you know, what we're trying to do for the continent, to like developing the continent and bringing good into the continent and whatnot. But all of the other firms are like, wherever they're practicing, that's actually where they're from, where they grew up. But something that you will notice is that none of them went to school, in their countries. But that's a limitation that the continent has right now, because we don't have a lot of architecture schools. Like in Ivory Coast, for example, the first architecture school just opened up in 2016. So it's not even 10 years old yet. So all the architects you'll see practicing at home, usually they went to school in France, in Belgium. I always joke that we always go back to our colonizer, but it makes sense because it's the language that we speak. So they usually go back to, they'll go to France, or they'll go to Belgium or Canada. For like the Kenyan architects, for example, like they went to school in the UK, and now they're like Reba architects and whatnot, but they decided to move back home and practice. So that's a limitation that we have, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how things change as we get more architects trained locally. Because right now, even me having done my education here, I'm like, my brain is also Eurocentric in a way. As much as I'm actively trying to fight it, it's inevitable. It's ingrained in us. So I think it'll be interesting to see, or a lot of them. There's a really big school in Togo. So the Francophone countries, sometimes they'll go to school in Togo, and it's massive architecture school. I think that's like the largest one that we have on the continent. So a lot of architects in Ivory Coast, for example, like if they didn't go to school in Europe, they probably went to school over there, because we just opened up for school not that long ago.
And what is that school called again?
Togo, I can't think of the name right now, but it's a really big school. I can look it up once we finish. But the definition of local architects, I think, is very, at least in my mind, I haven't quite defined that, what that is, the African context. I don't know, who had the question first?
For you. Basically, as you're making a book and you're thinking about who's using it and how do like, what do you hope for, like, what do you hope is like how students or people using your book use it, and how does it like move the like, what do you hope to like add the dialogue of what does African modern contemporary look like?
That's a tough question. I'm very early in the development of this. So I'm still figuring that out. But something I did decide is that I want to implement my voice in there somehow, but I'm planning to interview some of these architects. And something that the exhibition didn't necessarily do. I think right now it gives you a nice overview. You get to look at these drawings and whatnot. But I think maybe focusing on certain topics that are specific to the countries that they're working in. So one of the projects you'll see from Idengo Architecture, for example, is this two sets of affordable housing projects that they did. And the first set of it ended up falling through because they couldn't get funding from the government and get all these subsidies to make it happen. And the owner realized, why am I struggling with all this? Turned it into a lumber plantation, and now they're selling wood, and he's making so much money off it. But it was easier for him to do that and go chase a bag than put affordable housing, because the government was not trying to work with them. So there's certain issues that are very specific to some of these countries that I think I would want to touch more on. And I think right now the exhibition feels very broad and very, but I think with the book, I want to touch on very specific issues and expand on those and have these projects to support that. Because you could see them in the projects, but I don't think I necessarily categorize them in that way. So it might be harder to connect the dots as you're separate.
I'm having my question again. Well, I have more of a comment. So last summer I went to Nigeria, and that's where I was born and not raised, but I was just born and they took me to America. Um, but I went there last summer and my aunt is creating a hospital and we went there just to see like the bare bones of it. And I was wondering like why aren't there architects like doing all of this? Because all we have is like all we value is engineers and like factory makers. And that's like the entire building right now. Like it's just concrete. And when you just like explained that we have a lack of architect firm that or architecture culture, that was like, okay, it's just that's why a lot of people that I know who are like African like me or yeah, just African like me, that's why they're coming here to the States and just like going to do their architecture degrees and then literally just stay and work. Like that's it. So
Breaks my
yeah.
heart so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm here right now, so I can't. But it's like it breaks my heart in the sense that like the countries are so young. Like we got our independence in the 60s, so most of the countries are about 60, 65. I don't even think any of them have reached 70 yet. We might have a big celebration, big party for the first time ever 70. But a lot of the countries are so new. Like 60 years old is not like that's something about parents, grandparents. Our grandparents are even older. Like they've seen it all. My grandma was like, I used to march on that bridge for our independence. I said, Grandma, you? I said, you sitting there right now, you can't even move. Like, what do you mean you used to do all these things? But it's so crazy because everything is so new and so fresh. So sometimes when we get so frustrated with the governments, which I definitely do when I'm home, and I'm like, guys, it should not be this difficult to do these simple things. But I have to remind myself, I'm like, wow, the countries are so young, the governments are so young, and there's so many things to figure out. And for example, now in Ivory Coast, there's about 200 licensed architects in the whole country, which we could fit 200 people in this room. It's not a lot of people, and not many of them are women. But it's just now that the government is starting to put certain regulations that, if you're building a building that's a certain size, you need to get a licensed architect. That's not something that we had a couple years ago. But you'll see buildings crumbling all the time. Like this summer, they were building something next to this apartment complex, and they didn't pay attention, and they dug too far, and they hit the foundation. The building crumbled. You come home, your house is down because someone did not think to, but there are so many little things like that. You see a house, you see a house, you're walking, you see a house that you really like, and you're not gonna go look for an architect to design something similar for you. You'll just ask the builders, the contractors that are there. Usually it's not even contractors, it's just the builders. And you'll ask them, you go, hey, I really like this facade, I want the same thing. And they'll go, okay, give you a price. Next thing you know, you give them money, you get the materials, and they're building the exact same facade for you. But is this structurally sound? We'll never know till it rains or till the wind comes. But I think people just don't value architects as much back home. From what I've seen, like, at least in Ivory Coast, it's not, people don't see the value in architecture just yet. And I think as time was going on, as time goes by, we'll start to see a shift in that, especially as the government starts imposing these new rules and regulations and whatnot. But it's hard to do when you can't train that many architects in your own countries. So I think everything just goes hand in hand about it. But yeah, I don't think there's a value for architects just now, which is sad. But I also think a lot of us need to go back home and bring the knowledge back. Okay, I think that's important because I think that will speed up the development of these countries too. Because the more of us that leave and don't come back, it's like, okay, we're turning our backs in a way, and it's slowing everything down. It's like, yeah, it's like we're only 60 years old, but we could move so much faster if we just share our knowledge. So, okay.
Questions?
I'm curious about how different parts of the continent use different materials. So like you talked a little bit about how I guess like the general like thought about Africa, Africa and architecture in Africa is like passive design strategies, but you're like, there's north, south, east, west. It's a whole different thing going on in different places. So I'm curious, like, what are some trends that we might notice when we look through the books for like different materials or like approaches to design based on those like different geographical locations?
A lot of concrete, a lot of bricks, and maybe like some rammed earth too. A lot of wood, something you'll see. Like concrete is not that same, but it's what we have access to. Different like CMU blocks, when you actually see them making it on the site. Like every time you're walking past construction site, you'll see people mixing the things themselves and whatnot. So I think that's the biggest thing you'll see. But it's also because it's really affordable. A lot of the materials that we use here are not necessarily affordable there. Like I was driving home. Last time I was home, I was driving. I saw this building. It was the simplest building you had, but it was so beautiful. It had a perforated facade and whatnot. But it stood out to me. It's just like, well, like, we don't use that a lot. Like they had a lot of money. Brought this in. Like who's the owner of this building? So there's certain things that it's doable that would fit with that sustainable side of things and whatnot. But we just don't have access to it because it's just so expensive. But you'll see a lot of concrete, a lot of bricks, a lot of wood.
If there was a resource that you would say like really helped you cultivate and get enough information on, or like finding architects as inspiration, whether it's a book, whether it's like a writer on Arc Daily, or it's somebody or something that like you'd recommend us to check out as a way we can educate ourselves more, what would that be?
I feel like we're all very big on Instagram. I should have put a list of books in Instagram pages because there's so many that I follow. A book that I don't think I had this book on the list, but there is an architectural guide on sub-Saharan African architecture, and that's a great. Your library might have it actually. It's a set of these 7 volumes, and it breaks it down for different regions of the continent, and they'll show you various buildings, and some really fancy, beautiful buildings, some just average building that you'll see walking down the street. I think that one's a great resource. And you hear a lot of, there's different people that contributed to it, different researchers, architects, artists, and whatnot. So I think that's a great start. I'm trying to think, Instagram pages.
Is it just called Architecture of Sub-Saharan Africa?
Architectural Guide of Sub-Saharan African Architecture.
Okay.
It's by Dom's Publishers, DOMS Publishers. There's so many social media. If you look at who I follow on the exhibition page, you'll see some of those on here. But there's a lot of, I don't know, I'm blinking out on something, but like, I'm trying to think of general. Different presentations that people do. But check out, see who I follow on there. There's so many pages. See, when you're putting on this slide, like out. But yeah.
Would you mind putting the books that you suggested back up?
Yeah, of course. This is the first part of the top one is not sold in the US just yet. They're selling it in Canada. And you can only buy 1 copy at a time. I found that the hard way. So they sell that one in Canada, but everything else is available here. I'm gonna go to the next slide, Edwin. Oh look, I have it. This is here in Africa, the architectural guide. Yeah. That one's a great, that's a great book.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
Ajay, was he one of the firms that you showed in your exhibition?
No, it's not a part of the exhibition.
If not, we could go upstairs and look at the exhibition. And I want to thank Isabel for the presentation as well.
Pointing and having it.
Thank you everyone for attending online. We'll have this on our YouTube channel, for Maryland's architecture. So I'll share that link with you, those share for everybody else. Have a great night.
Mystery of the day.